beautiful welcome and just acknowledge and pay my respects to yourselves and elders past and present, and just also acknowledge where my family comes from. We're connected to the Wemba Wemba, Wirrugai and Gunditjmara nations of Western Victoria, as well as New Ireland province in Papua New Guinea. So just waiting on the tech to come through. That's all right. But I was very fortunate actually to grow up on Gomeroi country in Tamworth in New South Wales, and we were surrounded by really amazing, beautiful elders, and they were the first in our communities to really establish our medical services, our legal services, as well as our education services. And we were constantly being told this particular story, which is a Gomeroi story around the Warrnambool. And the Warrnambool is the Gomeroi word for the Milky Way. And hopefully we'll be able to get the Milky Way shining, but I'm sure you've all had the opportunity to get outside of our concrete jungle cities and to look upon the night sky and to look upon the Warrnambool, or as the word translates, the great river in the sky. And as you look upon it, it looks like this smoky river that's been, that fires have been lit beside these on the banks of the great river in the sky. And as the story says, it says that our ancestors have camped by the banks of this great river in the sky. And when we pass away, our spirit returns to the Warrnambool. And we sit by the campfires with our ancestors, with our elders, and we reflect on the life that we've just had. Those late night philosophical conversations, those really deep and meaningful connections that you make with friends, family, and loved ones during your lifetime. And then when it's our time to return back to this cycle, and this cycle's been going on for 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years, we come within in the form of shooting stars, and we lay within Mother Earth. And then when we're born, it's not so much this idea of conception, it's more around this idea that your spirit chooses who you're meant to be in the time that you're meant to exist. And as a young person growing up and being told this story, it really set up two things. It talked about this idea that the cycle that we're on, the cycle that we've been on for thousands of years, is shared. That the people that you meet along the way, they're on this same cycle. The connections that you make, even if it's that fleeting moment as you're walking down the street and you catch someone's eye, you know what I'm talking about, and there's that brief smile. It's those moments, because you know that you're on that same cycle. But it also says that the challenges that you're meant to face, or the challenges that you face along the way, from small things, very personal things, right through to these huge, wicked problems that impact the globe and impact our communities, these were the challenges that you're also meant to be facing. But the beautiful thing about this cycle that's been going on is to say that you're not necessarily meant to solve the issues. You're not meant to address it, maybe not in your lifetime. But what our responsibility is, what our role is, I think, is actually to be able to move it along just that little bit further, to progress it a little bit further, to carry that knowledge just that little bit further, to share our culture just that little bit further, for that next generation to be able to come through, to be able to pick it up, not as a burden, but as a gift, and to carry that forward. And this is as a story being told to us. It set up not only this sense of purpose, it also set up a sense of urgency, and it set up this idea that in every generation there are people that are the torchbearers, that are carrying the loads, that are being able to move things forward. And in 1965, I want to draw our minds to 1965, where it was at the height of the civil rights movements here in Australia and abroad. At Sydney University, a group of young students jumped on the bus. They were known as the Freedom Riders, and they went up through country New South Wales. It was when people were starting to get televisions in their own homes, and they were putting front and centre in people's lives the level of oppression and poverty and racism that existed within our communities. It really shone a light as to what was happening there. And this was part of an over 10-year campaign which ultimately led to 1967, the referendum, where over 90% of Australians voted in favour for Australians to be counted as citizens in our own country. And then at that same time, actually in March 1965, led by Martin Luther King, over 30,000 people marched from Selma to Montgomery. Now, this was not the very first march, if you know history there. This was actually the third. The first two were met with violence. They were met with aggression, and then coming together in that third march as part of the civil rights movement, but more specifically around voting rights in Selma and Montgomery. They led this march across from Selma to Montgomery, shifting the trajectory of African Americans' history and shifting the trajectory of civil rights in the US. And during this time, Martin Luther King wrote a number of sermons and books, and he said this thing. He said, "The hope of a livable, secure world lies with disciplined non-conformists who dedicate their lives to peace, justice, and brotherhood." Now, this is a really powerful quote. And mostly people are drawn to this idea of the notion of dedicating your life to peace, justice, and brotherhood. And this is a really important part of this particular quote, and very important. However, where I think the beauty lies within this particular statement is actually this notion of a disciplined non-conformist. Because it's easy to be a non-conformist, right? They call you a punk, they call you a heretic. But to be disciplined, I believe, is to be focused, is to be persistent, and to have grit. And so for the last few years, really the last decade, through my work, working with young Indigenous kids right through to engaging global leaders, I've been exploring three elements. And they have been, well, what is a disciplined non-conformist? Why do we ultimately need them in regards to shifting and shaping change and shaping the future? And then how do we actually shape the next generation of disciplined non-conformists? And importantly, how do we actually underpin the movements that to be connected with Aboriginal culture, Aboriginal movements, and informed by communities? So ultimately, what is a disciplined non-conformist? And the way that I think about a disciplined non-conformist is the ability to work within systems to be able to change systems. It's not about breaking it off and building it somewhere else. It's actually talking about bending the arc, or to borrow another Martin Luther King reference, is to bend the arc towards justice. It's about being able to bend it towards something. And a disciplined non-conformist, I believe, is someone who's dedicating their lives not only to peace, justice, and brotherhood or connection, but also ultimately to human dignity. The reason we need them is because they're not afraid in a room full of yes men to raise their hand and say, no, not this time. They're not afraid to be able to stand up, to fight for people, to highlight the voices that are missing from the room, to be able to create a larger table to ensure that there are more people and more perspectives that are feeding into processes and protocols and policy. And then ultimately, how do we shape the next generation? And this is what I've really been dedicating the last many years of my life in understanding and exploring. I believe that it actually starts with understanding your history. If you understand your history, it lets you know, you understand what's come before you, the decisions that you've made, as well as the decisions that have been made for you. It talks about the ability to understand the good, the bad, the ugly, but also the brilliant. It allows us to think about the role of cultural identity, cultural values, and cultural strength, and what it really means to stand on your country. It talks about who you are and how you exist in the world, but it also sets up this belief that if I am the sum total of everything that's come before me, then I am ultimately being able to define what comes after me as well, which is an important notion that you can shape the future. The second element, which I think we have a great opportunity in Australia to underpin who we are as a nation, who we are as a community, with traditional and cultural values. But values, as many of you know, they're informed by your upbringing, informed by family, they're informed by television. But there are shared values, there are cultural values, there are values like reciprocity. Yes, there's values like respect, but respect is also made up of connection. It's made up of relationships. It's made up of responsibilities. It's made up of accountabilities. Your values let you know and inform the way what you stand for, but also what you don't stand for. And when you have a deep understanding of history and the ability to be able to, and the knowledge that you can influence it, often knowing what you don't stand for is often the most powerful insight that you can hold in your life as you move forward. The third element, and I love this one, is courage. Often people interchange the word courage with bravery. However, the etymology, the meaning, the origin of the word of courage is to be wholehearted. Isn't that beautiful? It's not about being, the toughest person in the room. It's actually about being committed. It's about being persistent. It's about being pulled towards something. It's about stepping forward with no clear step or no clear landing in mind, but being committed enough, being compelled enough, being courageous enough to be wholehearted and to be able to step out knowing that you understand who you are, where you come from, what you stand for, what you don't stand for, what you want to see in the world, and then stepping out and ultimately taking action. And so my belief is, when we talk about how do we bring and shape First Nations knowledge and culture, and how do we inform the world, we need people that are willing to work within systems to be able to shape systems. Yes, I'm a true believer that we need to have an up from the ground up, but we also need a top-down or from an inside-out movement. We need to be able to interlock and understand and connect and be able to bring knowledges together, almost like when salt water meets fresh water. We need that combustion of consciousness. We need that combustion of courage and capability in order to be able to shift and shape the world that we ultimately want to see in the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, I truly believe that what we need now, what we've needed in the past and what we need in the future, we need a generation of disciplined non-conformists. Ultimately, we need you. We need you to do the work, to understand your history, to connect with your values, and then ultimately, and hopefully collectively, step out into the unknown together, to stand strong in your beliefs and your convictions, and ultimately take the action that needs to be taken. Because change is not a matter of chance, it's a matter of choice, and it's not something to be waited for. Ultimately, it's something to be achieved. Thank you.